Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Tim. I'll be picking up where Stephen left off last week. He went over the last few verses. I believe it was verse 24 through 29 in Colossians chapter 1. And I would like to point out mainly one theme that he briefly hit on, but didn't really spend a lot of time on, and that was this the word mystery that you see there in Colossians 1, verse 26. Let me read to you verse 26. It says, "The mystery, having been hidden from ages and from generations, yet now has been made apparent to his saints." Now, this concept of a mystery was a big deal in this culture. There were all these pagan religions, and in fact, they're called mystery religions. The reason they were called mystery religions is because they claim to have some secret knowledge about the divine, about God, about heaven, things like that, about their particular God or whatever it was, the meaning of life and things like this. And the mysteries that they claim to have were only revealed to a few people who reached the highest levels of their particular cult. You may be familiar with the with Freemasonry. The Freemasonry has different levels. There are different branches of Freemasonry, but if you take, for example, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, they have 33 degrees in which the Masons can advance. And each time they advance from the first degree to the second degree to the third degree, they go through a rigorous training, and all of it is it's required that it's kept absolutely secret under pain of death. In fact, they swear in the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, they swear an oath that if they reveal the things that they're going to be taught, that they'll be dismembered. Their tongue can be cut out, or their throat can be split by other Masons and things of this nature. And so they safeguard their secrets by means of these oaths. And and unless you advance to the next level, you don't get the next little bit of information that helps you begin to try to put the pieces together until by the time you reach the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, you're supposed to have knowledge and understanding of some grand mystery, okay, about God, about the world, about government, about things like that. All right, well, it's this idea of a mystery being reserved only for the few initiated ones, and then those who supposedly have the knowledge of this mystery, they're the ones who were looked upon as being the elite of the elite. Okay, and so the various cult religions in the Greek world and Roman world also, they're called mystery religions because this is the way it was. You had to, through various acts that you did or contributions that you made or so forth, you could be advanced in their system of thinking, and they'll just give you the next little nugget until supposedly you reach the end and you find out the mysteries of the universe are revealed to you, supposedly, right? Well, it was all a bunch of rubbish, as you probably guessed. And in fact, one of the earliest Christian writers by the name of Justin Martyr talks in his dialogue with Trypho. He talks about how how he was pursuing these different philosophical and religious schools that supposedly were going to reveal to you these secrets, and how that he paid a lot of money and to advance in these different things. And what he found out in the end, as he worked his way up the ladder of learning these various mysteries, was it was all a bunch of hokey nonsense that just came out of people's imagination. And it was just a bunch of myths. And the idea was that it was worthless nonsense, but yet it was presented to the masses as being the most valuable thing, that you could strive after and achieve, was the advancing in these mysteries and learning these mysteries. And so this was a big part of the Greco-Roman world that the city of Colossae was in. Now, the Jewish mystics, which includes the Essenes, but the Essenes were not the only Jewish mystics. There were other Jewish mystics as well. But we use the term Essenes kind of in this series to incorporate all the various groups of Jewish mystics. But basically, as Stephen pointed out to you before, what they did was they took this the pagan ideas from the mystery religions and Greek philosophy and the mythology, Greek mythology, and they tried to interpret the Old Testament scriptures, the Jewish scriptures, through that kind of thinking. And so they came up with Jewish fables. In fact, Paul talks about this in Timothy. He talks about to beware of the Jewish fables. And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about these fables that were supposed to be mysteries that, of heaven and all this stuff. Now, the book of Enoch, we've mentioned it before, but the book of Enoch is a text that was written by these mystic Jews prior to the time of Christ, but it was very popular at the time of Christ by these mystic Jews that Paul is writing to refute in the book of Colossians. And if you read the book of Enoch, and I encourage you, if you're not familiar with it, to at least look it up and look at some of the highlights of it. It talks about a Messiah figure. It talks about the angelic realm. Basically, the whole theme behind the book of Enoch is that supposedly in Genesis, when it says that God took Enoch, that he walked with God and God took him, it's supposed to pick up where that verse leaves off. And Enoch is taken up into heaven, and there he is revealed to him all kinds of things, okay, including where dead ghosts go when they die, including, and it was actually a place on earth in this mythology that's in the book of Enoch. He goes, supposedly angels take Enoch and show him how the whole solar system works. And in the story, if you read the book of Enoch, stars in the sky are living beings, according to the book of Enoch. And there's the solar system is the way it works is elaborated in the book of Enoch as some great mystery, right? Well, supposedly Enoch is shown how the sun, summer and winter occur, how the various planets and stars and sun and moon move and all that kind of stuff. And it's absolutely nonsense from a scientific point of view. For example, there's all these windows in the heavens and the eastern horizon, and the sun passes through a window which is why we see sunrise. It's dark because the sun is outside that window, and then it comes into this window, which then it's carried by a chariot of horses. It's carried across the sky by the wind. The sun is moving by the wind, okay, and is blown across the sky to the west, and then it exits out through another window in the west, and then instead of, as we would think of it from the earth being a globe, we would say, well, the earth is actually spinning. But from a human perspective, it looks like the sun, is traveling around the earth. But from our perspective, it looks like the sun goes down and sets in the west and, goes under and comes back up on the other side. Well, no, not in the book of Enoch. No, there the sun goes down, it sets in the west, and it makes a 90-degree turn, and it goes all the way around the horizon by way of the north. And then it pops back into the window on the other side. And the reason you don't see it going around to the north is because it hasn't come through the window. All right. Well, anyway, that's just one example of the nonsensical myths that is contained in the book of Enoch. Again, written by Jews, written by Jewish mystics who tried to take the Old Testament scriptures and mix them and combine them with the Greek mythologies, Greek philosophies and mythologies from the Greek culture, and so that's the mush that you get. And they thought these things were absolute mysteries. So the Book of Enoch pretends to be revealing all these different mysteries about the heavens and the earth and what happens when you die and all this stuff, and it's all a bunch of mythological junk nonsense. Okay, but yet in that culture, they valued this kind of stuff as being, this great body of knowledge, and its value came from the fact that they kept it secret and they only would reveal it to certain people as they advanced through their rigorous stages of all the things they had to do in order to make it to the next level of some particular mystery religion. And so, there they are, Jews, and they're surrounded by these kinds of things going on. So they just basically took the same idea, the same basic concept, and they incorporated the Jewish scriptures. And they tried to interpret the Jewish scriptures in this mystical fashion so that they could, you could read the Jewish scriptures and you didn't really get it because there's some deep hidden meaning under the surface and so forth. And so, they did this with Enoch and other things as well. They did things with Moses, supposedly mysteries that Moses kept secret and was only revealed orally and passed down, and only a few elite people knew these special secret teachings of Moses and so forth. And this is what the Jewish mystics prided themselves on. Well, the Apostle Paul here in Corinth, what he's doing here is he is trying to show the Colossian assembly, who were surrounded by these Greek mystics who were, claiming to be superior to them, because they had some kind of special knowledge, which was a bunch of fables. He's trying to show these Colossians the superiority of the true story that God has put in his word. All right, the real story, the story of God's redemption of mankind, and the ultimate inheritance we have in the coming kingdom, gaining victory over death, and by means of the resurrection to eternal life. See, the Greeks' idea of something after death was, some kind of Elysian fields. They had, myths about the underworld and where ghosts go when they die and all this kind of nonsense. So Paul is contrasting here in this book. He's contrasting the truth of God's overall plan, which was indeed a mystery. In fact, all these other Jewish fables, these other mysteries, and the pagan mystery religions, all of their stories are absurd. First of all, because none of them can be proven. They don't have any historical fact behind them. It's just all from somebody's imagination. But secondly, the true mystery, the ultimate mystery, was how that God had hidden his plan to redeem the entire creation back to himself, how he hid that in such a way that it was hidden in plain sight, that the people didn't really grasp it. In fact, it was hidden, and so much so that even the prophets who actually wrote about it did not fully understand it. In fact, we see Peter says that when he talks about the prophets who prophesied, that they were prophesying of the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. And it says who they were inquiring diligently concerning what does all this mean? It doesn't seem to add up or make any sense. And they were told The prophets were told not to concern themselves with it, that they were writing for generations that were going to come after them, and that was for us, that is for Christians later, that they would be able to understand it. And that's because the mystery was not to remain a mystery. The ultimate mystery, the mystery of God, the real mystery, was to be revealed. And so we see in Colossians 1:26, he says, the mystery having been hidden, and there is a perfect tense verb, which means it was hidden at a particular point, and that was at the very beginning, but it remained hidden. That's what the perfect tense would imply there. Having been hidden from ages and from the generations, yet now, that is in this age, was made apparent to his saints. The mystery was revealed in this age, that is the age of Christ and the apostles. Now, the mystery that Paul is talking about here concerns, first of all, it concerns God's entire plan for his creation. The reason why he created man, the reason why man fell into sin, all of the reason why God brought forth or begat a son at the very beginning who assisted him in creating everything, and what God's ultimate purpose was going to be for this son of his. All these things are incorporated into this mystery. All right. Now, I want to show you. At what point the mystery was revealed. That is, God blew the lid off of this mystery and explained it clearly. All right. Now, let's take your Bibles and turn to the 24th chapter of Luke, please. Now, this is, you may recall that a lot of things that Jesus said, the disciples did not understand. In fact, the Gospels go out of their way to tell us that they did not understand. And there are other things that it says that they didn't understand this until after Jesus rose from the dead. Then they remembered his words and what he had said to them. You may also remember that Jesus taught his apostles by means of parables. Lots and lots of parables. Parables are allegories, right? It's a story. It's a fictional story, but it's meant to parallel something. And it says that he explained some of these things to his disciples, particularly when he was talking about the coming kingdom. But there are other things that were hidden from them, that they did not understand concerning his parables until after certain events took place. Like, for example, until after his crucifixion and his resurrection. And in some cases, not until after the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 did it really begin to make a lot of sense. Okay? So I want to show you that that throughout the Gospels, what we see is that Jesus is saying things that seem completely bizarre, not only to his apostles, but particularly to the unbelieving and the scribes and Pharisees and so forth. They thought he was off his rocker with a lot of the things that he was saying. Like, for example, in John 8, when he tells the scribes and Pharisees who are questioning him, he says to them, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it, and he was glad. He was excited. And they tried to pick up stones to stone him to death. Or then he says, before Abraham was, I am. Right? It just blew their minds. What in the world is he saying? Well, see, what Jesus was doing was he was giving little bits and pieces of the mystery, the parts of the puzzle, right? But not until his resurrection did he put all the pieces together to show his apostles what the whole picture looked like. And even then, there was still more for him to teach his apostles, which is why in John 14, 15, 16, he talked about the coming of the helper, that the holy breath of God that was going to continue to lead them and show them and guide them and reveal these things. He said he's going to show you and teach you these things that Jesus was not able to teach them while he was here. But when Jesus first began to reveal the mystery, and Jesus is the one who did it, and he did it on a particular day. Okay, so let's go to Luke chapter 24. It says, "Now on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women with them came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared, but they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. Then they went in and did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. And it happened, as they were greatly perplexed about this, that behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. Then as they were afraid, they bowed their faces to the earth. They said to them, Why do you seek the living among the dead?" Now, notice the question of the angels. Why are you seeking the living among the dead? Well, of course they were seeking. They didn't know Jesus was alive. Should they have known Jesus was alive? Could they have known Jesus was alive? Well, if they understood the mystery, they would have known, because it's written about in Psalm chapter 16 and other places as well. But it's done in a manner in which it's concealed. So it says, "He is not here, he is risen. Remember how he spoke to you when he was still in Galilee, saying," quote, and now they quote, the angels quote what Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the third day rise again." And they remembered his words. Now, when he said those things, they thought he was nuts. In fact, Peter, when Jesus first started saying that he was going to be crucified, Peter said to him, "No, Lord, this will never happen to you." And Jesus turned to him and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You don't understand the things of God." Right? So it's clear that the disciples did not understand this when Jesus told them that he was going to be crucified and raised the third day. Then they remembered his words. Then they returned from the tomb and told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. And their words seemed to them like idle tales. They don't get it, right? And they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb, and stooping down, he saw the linen clothes lying by themselves, and he departed, marveling to himself at what had happened. Now behold, two of them were traveling the same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. Now he is resurrected now, right? But they don't know it. Except for the report from the women. They don't know what's going on. So it says, "But their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him. And he said to them, What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad?" Then one of those whose name was Cleophas answered and said to him, "Are you only a stranger in Jerusalem, and have you not known the things which happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" So they said to him that things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. And notice they didn't say who was the Messiah, because they're having doubts. And how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel, that is, the Messiah. They were hoping he was the Messiah, but they were not quite sure. At least now they were having doubts about it. Besides all this, today is the third day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us when they did not find his body, and they came saying they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Now, they obviously didn't believe it, as it said earlier. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. Then he said to them, this is Jesus speaking now, O fools, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all the prophets, believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter his glory? And you know, if you go back and look at the Old Testament, read Isaiah 53, it's all about the suffering of the Messiah and his death. They didn't understand how that could happen, and then him come and establish his kingdom on the earth, as the prophets also wrote about. They didn't understand that. Now look at this, verse 27. And beginning at Moses, that's the Torah, the first 5 books, and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So he took the scriptures, he took the words of Moses, and he pulled all these different passages out, and he showed them the passages, and he explained how he is in his own, what he was going to do is all interwoven throughout Moses and the prophets. And it's not only what he was going to do in the future, but it's also what he was doing back there when he appeared to Moses in the burning bush, when he is the one, as the angel or the messenger of the Lord who called to Abraham out of heaven and swore. He said, by myself I have sworn. And he swore the oath of the covenant to Abraham there, right? Jesus appears all throughout the Old Testament scriptures, both in his pre-incarnate state as he was interacting with Abraham and Moses and Joshua and others, and also in prophecy as to what he was going to do in the future with regard to his birth, with regard to his crucifixion, his resurrection, his priesthood even. His present priesthood in heaven is even prophesied in Psalm 110, being a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And you see the book of Hebrews goes and takes all these themes and it weaves them together into this amazing revealing of the mystery. That's one of the reasons I love the book of Hebrews, by the way, is because it is absolutely laying bare the mystery that was hidden throughout the Old Testament scriptures and laying it all out for us to see, and how it's all fulfilled through the Son of God, Jesus Christ. So verse 27, and beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So wouldn't you love to have heard that sermon? This is Jesus pulling the lid off of all these Old Testament scriptures and showing how they all fit together and how they all point to him. All right. Then they drew near to the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone farther, but they constrained him, saying, abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to stay with them. Now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, that he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us? So they rose that very hour, and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11, and those who were with them gathered, saying, the Lord is risen indeed, and has appeared to Simon. And they told about the things that had happened on the road, and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. And as they said these things, Jesus himself stood in their midst of them, and said to them, peace to you. And they were terrified and frightened, and supposed to have seen a spirit. Now, that's the ones who were not present on the road to Emmaus. That's all the rest of them. And he said to them, why are you troubled, and why do doubts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. While they still did not believe for joy and marveled, he said to them, have you any food here? So they gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb. And that was proof that he was in fact flesh. And he took it and ate it in their presence. Then he said to them, these are the words which I spoke while I was still with you, that all things must be fulfilled which were written in the law of Moses and in the prophets and in the Psalms concerning me. And he opened their understanding that they might comprehend the scriptures. This is, again, the revealing of the mystery. But notice, it's not that he just explained some things to them that had no basis in the law and in the prophets and in the Psalms. It's that he showed them how all these things were contained right there in the Psalms and in the books of Moses and in the prophets. It's all there. I mean, read Psalm 22. Psalm 22 is all about the crucifixion. It even talks about how they parted his garments, gambled for his garments, and all that, right? It's all there in Psalm 22. The only problem is when you read Psalm 22, which was written by David, it sounds like David is talking about himself. He starts off by saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus quoted that on the cross because David was writing the future words of Christ and describing the situation Christ was going to be in. See, this is how it was hidden. This is one of the ways in which it was hidden, by it appearing to be talking about the writer when in fact it was talking about one of his descendants, that is Jesus Christ, right, through Mary. So anyway, you can see that Jesus is, it was on the day of his resurrection and not before his resurrection that Jesus explained to them this mystery. Now, I want you to go to Romans chapter 16 and verse 25, and I'll show you that the Bible actually says that this is when the mystery was first revealed through Christ himself. Romans 16, verse 25. Now to him who is able to establish you according to my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ. Well, what preaching of Jesus Christ? Does that mean the preaching about Jesus? No, it's referring to the preaching that Jesus himself did. And it's talking about to his disciples on the day of his resurrection. To him who is able to establish you according to my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ according to the revelation of the mystery, kept secret since the world began, but now made manifest and by the prophetic scriptures made known to all nations according to the commandment of the everlasting God for the obedience of faith. Wow. It was Christ who first revealed the mystery, who wove all these things together that Sunday afternoon. First when he appeared to the two on the road to Emmaus, and then to all the 11. He spent that afternoon going through the scriptures, line by line, explaining to them all these things, and they were utterly amazed. They were amazed that they hadn't put the pieces together. They were amazed that even their religious leaders, the scholars at the temple, hadn't put the pieces together. They didn't understand how this was going to play out. And there it all was, right there in black and white, in Moses and in the prophets. It's all there, right? All right, so now go to Ephesians chapter 1. The Apostle Paul talks about this mystery again. Actually, one more. Go back to 1 Corinthians. There's a passage there I want to briefly mention. Verse 6. Chapter 2. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 6. However, we speak wisdom among those who are mature, yet not the wisdom of this age. That was all the mythologies and Greek philosophy and all that other crud. Nor the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. But, and the rulers of this age is not talking about human rulers. They might be the ruler of a kingdom, but they're not the ruler of an age. All right, that's talking about demonic forces. So then he says, but we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the ages for our glory. At the beginning of creation, that's before the ages. The ages refers to measured time. So before the ages refers to that clause in the beginning. All right. Then he says about this mystery, he says in verse 8, which none of the rulers of this age knew. Now the rulers of the age, again, are the demonic forces. None of the rulers of this age knew, for had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for those who love him. In other words, that's talking about how that mankind did not understand. They did not get the mystery. The demonic forces did not understand the mystery because they were prepared to pounce to overturn God's plan at every turn. Right? They tried to overthrow Israel. They tried to these demonic forces were constantly trying to overthrow God's plan. And so God hid it so that not even the demonic forces would understand it until God decided to reveal it, and he revealed it through his Son. All right? That's the point. Now go over to Ephesians chapter 1. Verse 9. Paul in Ephesians 1 is, as he's writing as a Jew, but as a believing Jew, all right? And Jews had something Gentile Christians didn't have, and that was believing Jews had a long history with God, their national history that Gentiles didn't have. All right, so Paul is writing from that perspective of a Jew who's a believer, but who has this long history of God revealing himself through the prophets and Moses and so forth. So he says, having made known to us, that is, the Jewish believers and the apostles, having made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure which he purposed in himself, that in the dispensation of the fullness of the times, that is, when the time arrived that God was waiting for, he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth in him. In him we also have obtained an inheritance, being predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. So this is the mystery again. He tells us partly what this mystery entails. It entails God reconciling the creation to himself. It says to gather in one all things in Christ. That is through Christ, by means of Christ, to reconcile all the creation together with God, and to do it by means of his Son. All right, that's a critical part of this. Now go to chapter 3, excuse me, of Ephesians, and Paul talks a little bit more about this mystery. He says, verse 1, he says, for this reason I, Paul, the prisoner of Christ Jesus for you Gentiles, if indeed you have heard the dispensation of the grace of God which was given to me for you, how that by revelation he made known to me the mystery, as I have briefly written already. And that was what he wrote in chapter 1. Now, by which, when you read, you may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ. Now, what is Paul saying? Why is Paul saying that they could understand his knowledge in the mystery of Christ? And he says that Christ revealed this to him by special revelation. Look at that again. It says, how that by revelation he made known to me the mystery, as I have briefly written already, by which, when you read it, you might understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ. What Paul is saying is, look, I wasn't one of the 11 that was present when in Luke 24, on the day of his resurrection, that Jesus sat there and expounded all this mystery. I wasn't present then because Paul was not converted then, right? Paul still was not converted until later that year. All right, it was much later in that same year of Jesus' resurrection that the Apostle Paul was on the road to Damascus, and he saw the bright light, and Jesus appeared to him. And then, if we read in Acts, continue reading in the story of Paul in Acts, we see that Paul went into Arabia, where he was instructed, personally instructed by Christ. Now, did Jesus leave heaven and come down there and sit there next to Paul and teach him? No, but by means of the Holy Breath, Christ was able to communicate directly with Paul and to teach Paul directly, just like Jesus called out to Paul from heaven and said, it is hard for you to kick against the goads. And Paul says, who are you? And he says, I'm Jesus, the one you are persecuting. Jesus talked directly to Paul at that instance, but he also continued talking directly to Paul when Paul went into Arabia, and he spent some time there, and Christ taught him directly, probably with an audible voice, as Paul learned the mystery. He put all these pieces together, just like he did for the apostles in the other apostles in Luke chapter 24. So anyway, let's continue. He says, how that by revelation he made known to me the mystery, as I have written already, by which when you read, you may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ, which in other ages was not made known to the sons of men, as it has now been revealed by the breath to his holy apostles and prophets. And this is what this is saying also, is that the mystery, not only did they hear it from the words of Jesus, but even more of the depth of this mystery, more of the details of this mystery, how many passages fit together, some of the finer points of this mystery continued to be revealed to the apostles after Jesus went back to heaven. You remember when he went to heaven, he said, "There's still many things that I need to teach you, but you're not able to bear them now," right? Or this was actually at the Last Supper there in John 15, 16. All right, but he was telling them he was going away, and he was going to be going back to heaven, but he promised them the helper who would continue the task of teaching and revealing the mystery. So the disciples, the apostles, did not have full knowledge of everything, the full knowledge of the mystery at the beginning when Christ first showed it to them on the day of his resurrection, but they continued to learn throughout the rest of their ministries until by the end of the apostolic age, all of it had been revealed. Every detail that was needed for us as Christians had been revealed through the apostles and was then deposited in the local assemblies to be handed down from generation to generation, and of course written about in the New Testament documents as well. So he says, about this mystery, he says in verse 6, that the Gentiles should be fellow heirs and of the same body and partakers of this promise in Christ through the gospel. So if you go back and read a lot of the prophecies in the Old Testament, you will find that there are prophecies about how God was going to redeem Israel, right? That's the main theme. But there are some prophecies that talk about how God was going to reconcile the whole world, the Gentiles as well. And Paul was one of the conduits through which God was going to do that. And so Paul recognized that was his mission, and that's why Jesus sent him on this mission, and it was to reveal to the Gentiles the fact that the mystery was also for them, and that they were to be included in this secret plan that God had orchestrated from the very beginning. All right, so that's essentially what the mystery was about. Now, if you go to Colossians chapter 2, again, reading from my translation, let's just read the first 4 verses. I want to make a few comments about that, and then we'll be done. He says, "For I wish you to have observed the great struggle I have concerning you and those in Laodicea." Laodicea was the sister city to Colossae, and so the two of them, there was an local assembly in each of those two cities. They were kind of like sister assemblies. And there is a letter written by Paul to the assembly at Laodicea, and a lot of people think it's lost. It's not. I'll tell you, it's the book of Philemon, but we'll talk about that more at another time. Anyway, he says, "And as many as have not seen my face in the flesh, so that their hearts may be called near, being united in love, and unto all riches of the complete assurance of comprehension, unto the full knowledge of the mystery of the God and Father and of Christ, in whom all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden." Look, what he's saying is, look, don't bother with these scenes. Don't bother with those Jewish mystics. They know nothing. Their so-called mysteries are nothing but myths. They're nothing but imaginations. Human imagination. The real treasures of wisdom are hidden in God and in Christ. And I want you to notice that he says the full knowledge, and that implies a process of learning until you have it all. All right? He says the riches of the complete assurance. Now, that word riches is interesting, because if you go back to the previous chapter, he talks about that they would know the riches of this mystery, that is with regard to the Gentiles. What is the riches? Riches refers to something of great value. See, once you understand the mystery of God and what he has done and how he has interwoven it throughout history, throughout his plan, how he's moved nations, how he's moved called people, and he's done all these things with a plan in mind, and that plan is absolutely amazing. And when you see God's hand having done all these things throughout history, and then you see that these are not just a bunch of random things. God has done all this stuff in order to orchestrate the plan, and the plan has been there all along in the scriptures, but in a way that was hidden, so that not only could people not understand fully what God was doing, but the demons wouldn't understand either. And so he says that being united in love and to all riches of the complete assurance of comprehension unto full knowledge of the mystery. And really that is the thing that drives us. You know, when we really understand what God is doing, and when we can see how he has been orchestrating everything towards this ultimate outcome, it builds our faith in God, doesn't it? It builds our faith in him. If God has for thousands of years been working according to a plan can clearly be shown to have been his plan from the very beginning, and God has been faithful to stick to the plan, you can bet that he's going to finish it. In other words, the promise of the hope of the inheritance that we have, victory over death by means of the resurrection, and the inheritance God has promised to us in the coming kingdom, that we can rest our faith and our trust in God that he is going to do exactly as he said. And the more we understand, the more we have full knowledge of the mystery, the more it inspires us in our Christian life, not only to press on, in day to day, but also to withstand anything that Satan or the world can throw at us, because we have an anchor for our soul. And that anchor is rooted squarely in the promises of God. And so this mystery, he says, is of God the Father and of Christ. And it's so amazing when you look at the Old Testament scriptures and you see this subtle plan that has been hidden and interwoven through there. A lot of it has to do with who the Son actually is. The fact that Jesus, in John's gospel, he repeatedly said that he came down from heaven. I am from above, you are from beneath, things like that. People are looking at him like, what? What are you talking about? You came from heaven. And he talks about he's going to go back to where he was before. He says, John says, no one has ascended into heaven except the one who came down from heaven, even the Son of Man who is in heaven. And Christ had already ascended when John wrote that. He's saying the only one who has ascended to heaven is the one who came down from there in the first place. What? Jesus didn't just come into being like the rest of us as a baby in a manger? No, he had a history before that, and it was of the Son of God. Who is Jesus is a huge part of the mystery, because it's through the Son that God intends to reconcile the whole creation back to himself. And so this mystery concerns the true nature of the Son. As if you have my translation of Colossians, go back to chapter 1, and beginning of verse 12, it says, he says, giving thanks to the Father, the one enabling us for the portion of the inheritance of the holy ones in the light. And that's talking about the resurrection and the kingdom. He rescued us out of the authority of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of the Son of his love. You see the Son there, in whom we have release through his blood, the pardon of sins. He, that is the Son, is the image of the God who is unseen. Excuse me. Firstborn of all creation. That is, he was the first one born or begotten. That was because he was begotten by the Father in the beginning. Because through him, everything was created, what is in the heavens and what is on the land, the seen and the unseen, including thrones, dominions, principalities, and authorities. Everything has been created through him and for him, and he is before everyone. And everything has stood together in him. And he is the head of the body, the assembly, who is the beginning. That's a title for Jesus, the beginning. Firstborn out from among the dead, so that in everything he should become the prototype, because it pleased God for all the fullness to reside in him. And that's talking about during his earthly ministry. And through him to reconcile everything to himself, having made peace through the blood of his cross. Through him, whether what is on the land or what is in the heavens. And this includes the Gentiles being reconciled to God, which is what he says then in verses 21 and 22. He says, and you, that is you Gentiles, having been alienated and formerly being enemies in the mind by wicked deeds, yet now he reconciled in the body of his flesh through death to present you holy and unblemished and unindictable before him. That is, you Gentiles can partake in this amazing plan of God. He didn't leave them out. God did not leave out the Gentiles. Yes, his plan was centered in the nation of Israel, and he used the nation of Israel as a conduit to bring about his plan, but his plan ultimately includes all the nations, all the Gentiles, right? Well, let's look at verse 4 of chapter 2. That's the last part that I quoted. I just want to make one comment about that, and we're done. So he says, let me read verses 1 through 3 again. He says, for I wish you to have observed the great struggle I have concerning you, and those in Laodicea, as many as have not seen my face in the flesh, so that their hearts may be called near, being united in love, and unto all riches of the complete assurance of comprehension, unto the full knowledge of the mystery of the God and Father and of Christ, in whom all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden. As I said at the beginning, Paul's comparing this amazing mystery that's verified through history and through the texts of the prophets. He's comparing that to the rubbish and mythologies of the mystic Jews and their Book of Enoch and the things, how they had taken what the prophets had said and put a mystical twist on them, and how that was just, it was absurd. So it says then, but I say, verse 4, look what he says, but I say this, that is all this about the mystery. He says, I say this so that no one might entice you with persuasive arguments. And the persuasive arguments that he's talking about are the arguments of those Jewish mystics and their bogus scriptures, such as the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees and other supposedly secret writings and so forth. These are Satan's counterfeit to the genuine mystery that is contained and hidden in the Old Testament scriptures, but was revealed by Christ and is revealed to us by means of the New Testament and his apostles, whom he sent out with this message to reveal the mystery. He sent out these apostles to all the nations, and the idea was so that we could grasp the depths of this mystery. And by grasping and having the full knowledge of God's mystery, nothing would stop us from pursuing it with everything that we have. All right, well, that's all we have for today. Stephen will be back next week, and I'm sure will pick up in verse 5. All right, God bless you all, and we'll see you soon.